So, in this episode of Unfinished, I am delighted to be welcoming Emma Miloyo. She is both a teacher and an architect. She's a prize-winning architect and has some extraordinary work under her belt in both education and construction. She's a friend, and I'm delighted to be welcoming you today, Emma. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's start. Let's start with this question about how you grew up. What's something that no one would ever guess about how you grew up? This might be the kind of detail that doesn't really make it into all your official fancy bios and so on.
Yeah. So I was raised by a single mother.
Just like me.
So that maybe doesn't make it to the bios, and there's
and yet it's a formative part.
Yes,
right?
and it's very important in the lens you see the world in. So I've over the years, while I do have some perhaps lessons that I've taken from that and the big one for me is about strong women. So my mother was, breadwinner. She was everything. And I think that's a beautiful lesson that I've learned from being raised by a single parent. So people sometimes have the perception that children raised by single parents wouldn't be well adjusted. I think I'm a pretty well adjusted.
I think you are too.
So that's an interesting something that people don't know because they don't expect it of me.
Especially given the relatively classical looking appearance that you have these
exactly.
days, husband, two children.
The dog.
Exactly.
Yeah. So people wouldn't guess that was
so your mom was a big inspiration to you.
She is.
She continues to be. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's something people wouldn't guess.
Beautiful. Okay. What's the best advice that you were given when you were growing up?
Yeah.
And the worst? And that might be from your mom, the
Yeah.
wise, inspiring lady, or others around you.
Yeah. So I think my mother was not necessarily one to give advice, but I think from her life, I think the big thing for me was around, number one, her go-getter attitude, and that was something that you can make it, she was a maths teacher in a faculty of, like a tertiary institution, probably one of two females on that faculty of very many men. So that's something that I sort of gleaned and, learned that you can be what you want to be, you just apply yourself, you can achieve that. But very interestingly for me is around financial literacy that because we were many times just the two of us in the house. Yeah. I was her friend or her confidant in some things, because she didn't have necessarily other people to talk to, or to share insights. But around money, she gave me a lot of lessons around money, around how to borrow, because she would share. Sometimes it's because I wanted something, and she's like, "Oh, sweetheart, we can't afford that. Just look at my payslip. I don't have enough money because this is going to this, and I'm doing this." So transparent, and that's like lessons that I've learned around how to manage debt, and people are, at least in this side of the world, very averse to debt and mortgages and things like that. But my mother would end up teaching me a lot about housing and real estate that I still apply today. I still give people that advice, and that's a big one for me that just stands out, like how she shared her financial journey and how it impacts my thinking and how it has impacted my thinking from day one when I got my own paycheck. Yeah.
Indeed. And when you set up your own businesses,
exactly.
You're probably less afraid than the average of taking financial risk.
Exactly.
Thanks, Mama.
Yes. And I think the other question was probably advice, the worst advice. And I think also in the same context of not being necessarily given the advice, but seeing certain things. And I think with their generation, there was a lot of, there's risk, but there's also, working, that the only way to success was employment or working for government and working for 30 years for government. So that perception of, I didn't take the advice because I went out and, in some ways launched my own consultancy and the school, but that was just something that and it's a generational challenge.
It's a generational thing, and still most people are stuck in that that schema of money for time.
Yes.
In a straight line.
Yes.
The only way you can make more money is by working more hours.
Yes.
And you rejected that.
Yeah, I rejected it. It was
Do you remember the point at which that happened?
Yeah, probably not earlier in life, because we always thought, get a good job, go to uni, pass very well, get a good employer, and work very hard, and the rest, will shape up. But I think that's partly because my husband, who then became a business partner, grew up in a very different setup. So the whole typical rich dad, poor dad. Like the story that he grew up with an entrepreneur as a father, so he was less risk averse in that sense than I was. So he's like, we can do this, and that's a switch that when it started working and clicking after, he's like, this is a different way of doing things. That yes, you can lose everything, but you can rebuild it just as well. And that's probably when it's, and that was later in my late 20s when it actually clicked. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So when you were in those years of choosing what to study at university and what you thought your career would look like, what was really on your mind when you were making those choices?
Yeah. I think, of course, you're a little naive when you're younger, but I was always a creative. I love working with my hands. I did very well in fine art, and I'm a pretty good painter, actually.
We must talk.
Yes, exactly.
Still some wall space here.
I know, I can get you a piece up, yeah. So that was something that I always knew that I want to, tap into my creative spirit. It nourishes me, and so I really did want to do something in the creative field. And with career counseling and the like, I was told probably you should explore architecture because it's some very good. It's a science and an art at the same time. Yeah, you are designing, you are creating, you are experiencing something that you've thought in your mind. But there's a math to how it stands, and so that was a good bridge, and I think it fit me very well. I wouldn't do it differently if I had a chance.
That's wonderful to hear. I know that I would choose anthropology or marine biology if I were doing things again, but that's because I have this fantasy about working with dolphins. But hey, probably a good thing I didn't go in that direction.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I wouldn't be here.
You'd
Absolutely.
Be somewhere.
Exactly. So, when you think about the career that you have now, which is a mix between running an architecture practice and being the creator and CEO of a small chain of schools with a very unique philosophy, what is it that you most love about what you do now?
I funny enough, and I say this because I said I wouldn't do things differently. I would still choose but I love building teams. So and I've discovered I like selling things. I can sell ice to an igloo, as I say. So that's been very interesting. But what I love most about both is building teams, creating work environments that make people thrive. That's been really, really fulfilling. And work environments then translate to happy clients, happy students. So just that whole philosophy around, human resource and how creating teams that work and creating cultures where people really love to come to work and enjoy each other's company as colleagues, and then how that translates to productivity and into the clients has been just very interesting. Probably came upon it by chance. You build a team and like, okay, something's working here, and people ask you like, how do you get these people? And like, it's probably the environment you put there that people come into, and you bring out the best in them. So that's been the most fulfilling, and just seeing how then it translates to happy children who say the same thing, that they feel safe, that they can talk to their teachers, and that's just, when I hear that, it's like, I really feel good. Yeah. So that's been very fulfilling.
And when things get tough, or when you have to deal with the boring parts, what keeps you going?
Probably that's where my mother's work ethic comes in. Just get it done. It's got to be done. It's boring, crunking the numbers or working out budgets and things like that. That's the stuff that's a bit more. That's the numbers part that I don't enjoy too much. But I've just gotten a way of just getting it done. It's part of what needs to be done. But I'm really looking towards delegating that aspect of what I do enjoy a little bit more as we grow, and seeing them, the people who love doing like delegate that to the people who would love doing that, and get more strategic in what I do at the school and the firm. Yeah.
And of course, that's the beauty of having relatively large organizations, is that to some extent you can delegate away the stuff that you either don't like as much or aren't as good at or whatever, sort of spreading the strengths around. But if you had to identify a weakness of yours that shows up currently despite all your best efforts, what would that be?
I think it's that. It's delegation and sometimes letting it go, something that you've built. I said I love building teams and letting go sometimes to let people run with something. So I do find myself still saying, why did you do that? Or what should we do about this? Or wanting to be part of creating something. I enjoy that so much. I want to be there. But it's not sustainable sometimes because they're waiting for feedback from you or looking for you, and you're doing 20 things. And yes, that's something I really like. How do you let it go and let people learn? They could make mistakes, but let them learn through their mistakes. Let them think through some things. Yeah.
So you should. You often do. What are the alarm bells that you notice when you're about to veer into not delegating enough?
Yeah. Well, when people have to look for me, I'm like, oh my God, he actually came to ask me whether this and this should happen. That's a decision he could have done on his own. I'm like, why would you come to me then? I'm like, have I created the culture? But if he's feeling the need or she's feeling the need to come and ask me a question, does that paint us some picture? Have I or when I see something happening, I'm like, why did you guys do that? And alarms are like, now you're telling them it's not okay. Or if they've gone off and done something and you're calling to ask, why did this happen? How did it happen? Then I hear them like, oh, don't call. Yeah. Or don't give your advice. Because sometimes, yes, you're like, oh, this is great that you did this way. But when and I love how you did it, but you could have done it this way. But that speaks to them like, next time I need to also ask for your advice before I go ahead with something. So that's a big one for me. Yeah. Letting go. Yeah.
It sounds as though you've got a system tuned into to avoid doing it so much, but that's the whole point. We're not finished.
Yes,
right? We
we're
are
not.
unfinished
And
beings.
life is that. You're working through all those.
Yeah. So you're clearly a very growth and developmental driven person, and you've done all kinds of work. You work with a coach. We have coachy conversations now and then in our walks. What about a moment when you let your own standards slip? Something that you still cringe about a little bit. Would you be willing to share a cringy moment with us?
Sure. I think it's in those moments, like I said, when I asked a teammate why did this happen this way, and then made them feel a certain type of way. So I think in those moments, again, back to the theme of letting people thrive, letting them try it on their own. But my cringe moments come when I've called someone and asked them, why did this happen? Why? Or when I'm calling them to say there's a typo in the message that you sent out. Yeah.
And what's that cringe most about when you have those moments?
It's about not letting even other people in hierarchy do their job in terms of, hey, there's a little problem here, because then I've been disempowered. Even like if I'm calling someone in communication to say there's a typo in this message, or you could have framed this message this way, I've disempowered the people who supervise him or could have stepped in. So that's that thing of, oh no, I went and did it again. Let it go. So those are my cringe moments when I pick up the call and like, why did I do that? My other cringe moments probably are, again, not letting go, but not letting go of people. Sometimes I struggle because I'm very relational and I like to build teams. Cringe moments have been when I've not let people go early enough, in terms of knowing this wasn't a right fit, and then letting them linger longer than they needed to, and do damage that could have been nipped in the bud. So being very cringe for me sometimes is being very clingy around teams, because I do take it personally when people say they want to leave. I'm like, we're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Why would you want to leave us? Yeah. And so my cringe moments have been that in telling, in realizing later when I asked people to stay on that wasn't a good decision. Yeah.
Holding on to an idea more than a reality,
Yes,
I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. And especially when you've worked hard on creating a culture and
Yeah.
environment that you believe to be pretty much perfect.
Yes.
It can feel so terribly personally painful. And yet the picture is bigger, isn't it, than our own egos.
Yeah.
But not always easy to let go of, definitely.
Yeah.
So clearly I hear that you're working on that ability to empower, to be less stuck in detail and weeds. What else are you working on, honestly?
Yeah.
You know, the really messy inner stuff that we don't perfect.
Yeah. I think I'm currently working on understanding that I'm unfinished, and therefore I'm not perfect, and therefore learning to take feedback as well, very for what it is, at arm's length, and saying that's feedback. It doesn't reflect on who I am. It probably reflects on how I do things, and doesn't speak to who I am. So working on taking feedback and being less defensive about things, about my teams, about my people. If someone says so and so might not be a good fit, I'm like, no, why? I love how they work and everything, and just being able to listen to the feedback around myself, around the team, around the things we do. So that's a process of being detached in a sense of feedback in who I am, and working on not quickly saying but I think this, like, if I don't even believe it, I don't need to. I can take what I need to take out of that, separate the wheat from the chaff, and take what I need to take, and what I know for sure. That's sort of a description of who I am. I don't need to speak up about it and say, but just take for what it is, and sometimes you don't have to speak out. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you can let it go.
And of course, on the other hand, there's that tendency that we were talking about earlier of the the Kenyan culture of saying sorry a lot. If it's not bad, it's probably sorry, right?
Yes.
And both of these, as you detach and take it as learning, as wisdom, as accumulated information
and one
context.
perspective, and not the whole 360.
Exactly.
That's one way you look at me, like with the elephant, and this person has seen the tail of the elephant.
Yes.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, I do have a tail, but
Yeah.
it's not the entire elephant. I do have big ears as well in the trunk. So this person's seen
Look
that.
how beautiful you are.
But that doesn't define me as a whole. Yeah.
Now, if we go even deeper and we think about what you're still scared to work on, what are those things that you should be thinking about? Maybe even admitting what that might be in this context could be a bit of a stretch, but what might you think about there?
Yeah. It goes back to the same thing of the defensiveness of being a little bit argumentative and about certain things that I believe in. So I'm not scared to admit it. So I don't think that this is a big one for me. So I'm not scared to admit, because I already have just now. Yeah. But I think that's it's messy in the sense of working on that, because there are days I don't do it. The days I'm like, whoa, was that you? You kept quiet through that whole conversation and let someone finish their thought cycle. So I think that's also a big thing, like letting people talk and finish their thought process before it speaks again to the micromanagement or to the defensiveness. Like, let people.
I think, in fairness, it also speaks to what I sometimes term the curse of the smart woman.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The independent-minded, grounded, strong woman who has been raised by another strong woman and who's been taught to have convictions and principles and to be comfortable with who she is and what she believes. That, when it flips too far, is what trips us up and gets us into cutting people off or not allowing things. And of course, within that curse is probably that sense of I know better. Because
Exactly.
you may well know better, right? But it's all about how you empower those around you and how you
I
let
might
things
know
happen.
better in my
Also,
it doesn't my truth
It's not.
They could both be better ways of doing things. And also the curse of leadership, of always having been a founder for all my career. Like probably did 1.5, 2 years of not being a leader, but then all the curse of leadership.
Yes.
I'm always in the room, I'm always the leader.
And so people look to you for the answers.
And when I speak, they think, oh, she said it already,
Yeah.
So that's the curse of leadership, and always being the founder, the vision bearer. So experiences where I'm with other leaders have been very interesting for me, because I'm like, what? Nobody thought my idea was the greatest.
Different context, different room.
Yeah, people are like, oh wow, that's a good idea, and they're doing it, and they've run off to do something. So being in rooms like, with other co-founders is usually quite humbling as well.
But it's a gift.
Yes.
Painful gift sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. And if I were to go and ask Chris, your husband, or your employees, or those who are close to you, what they wish you'd be working on, what would they have to say?
Yeah, I think it would be the same, like letting people speak their mind, speak through without jumping in with my great ideas. I'm a creative, so I'm already like 3 steps ahead or 5. I've already seen it to completion. Just letting people speak, think through their ideas, and holding back so that they can, be empowered, fail forward, without having to give my wisdom.
Do you use that little technique, which I just heard yesterday, I think, touted as something that's often used with teachers and in schools, although I hadn't particularly associated it with that. The question, do you want to be helped, heard, or hugged?
Wow, that's fantastic.
Isn't it?
I'm going to be using that one,
Isn't it lovely? Yeah. So simple.
Yeah.
And yet really, it's also a chance, I think, to be the one who takes the pause and asks the question. It's another way to avoid jumping in with the answer.
Solution, exactly. Yeah. And I was just telling you earlier that I do want to explore coaching as
your next thing.
As the next thing, in terms of just being able to also listen to people and let them work out the solution, and just be they're coming to me for a reason, but how do I not impose on them what I think is right and let them work through.
It's an incredibly powerful process and an endless struggle for any of us who work as coaches. We can often see the solution right over there, but it's not our job to say it's over there and it looks like that. But it is a beautiful process. So that we're going to do some work together to make sure that happens. But beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, what's your favorite way to begin a meaningful conversation? What's the move that you find actually opens people up?
How are you? How are you doing? It makes people pause, and I find that when people, I think innately we're selfish beings, and we do like being asked about how we are, but I find that when you ask about the person, that throws them off, especially in a work environment, in terms of how am I doing, in this whole situation. And when you give a chance for people to express themselves and where they are, I find that it works. It works.
It's a question of slowing down, isn't it? What I've noticed in many parts of Africa, but definitely here in Kenya, is that there is this ritual of all the things we say when we meet. Hello, good morning, how are you? And those are niceties. It's a question of how do you step away from the niceties and get into the really question, how are you really?
Doing, exactly. And it's even how you ask it, like maybe not at the beginning, like after someone has gone through this situation, like, okay, that's out there, but in the middle of a conversation, how are you doing? The pause.
I really want to know, rather than
at the beginning. So I found that works.
It generally does, and I love the idea of it being at more or less any point in a conversation, rather than as a starter, as alone. Books. We were talking about the book club earlier, but is there a particular book that you return to again and again because of its wisdom, or something that you find you actually use?
So all cliche, of course, but Atomic Habits is a book that I go back to a lot, just in terms of, routine towards your dreams or whatever you want to achieve, and how the little things do matter. It's just a reminder, the little things both ways, the good habits and the bad habits. And there's no perfection, we're unfinished, so you'll get into good habits, but along the way something will happen. So Atomic Habits is a great one for me. And just recently, like I was telling you, Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way is something I will certainly read. I've just finished reading it, but I will certainly go back to it, and just the lessons there about patience and perspective. Whatever's happening in your life, just always asking what am I being taught by this in this moment. If I lose a client, or if a situation with a team member, what good could come out of this, So someone's left your team, what could we milk out of this situation? And that change of perspective just makes things look very different. So Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way is certainly it's a big one. Probably ranks higher than Atomic Habits for me. In terms of a book I go back to.
And of course it's very story based.
Yes.
And story is the oldest universal language, so it hits us differently. For sure. Who most inspires you, living or dead? And what is it about the way they are that you want to find more of in yourself?
I don't think there's one person, so I could speak of a few, but Chris, my husband, very cliche. But I do admire, certain things about him. Just the grit to get things done, no matter what. His leadership style. He's we're going to get through this in terms of no matter what, we're going to get it done, and being able to push through that, and tenacity. I think that's just something that's very inspiring for me. And then I've got a couple of friends and who, different things about them. I have a friend who connects and is very conscious about meaningful relationships and how to nurture them, and that's something I draw out of. And I've got a friend who makes sure I'm plugged into my creative self. So it's different people for different seasons and for different things. But I think
nice that you find your inspiration close by.
I know.
You don't need to go and remind yourself of a fact about Napoleon or something
or
like that.
Obama.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's great. I think that's something we can all benefit from. Very definitely. Learning from each other and seeing the gaps and possibilities afforded by different ways of doing things. Let's come back. You said you're a fan of Atomic Habits, so habit stacks and all that kind of thing. Tell us about your real morning routine, not the one you would share on Instagram, but what actually happens on a typical morning for Emma.
You've caught me in a bad season. Right now I'm sleeping in, because somehow my sleep at 4:30 I'm awake, and I'm I'm not getting out of bed, so I'm staying in, and then that's not good, because 4:30 you're not going to go back to sleep. So but my morning routine typically was, I am an early riser. They call it the holy hour before everybody else is up. And
you've still got children at home, so obviously there are a lot of everybody else's that get up and disrupt things.
Mommy this, mommy that. So the 1 hour quiet reflection time and is very good for me, and getting some work done, especially around numbers. Sometimes that's the time it takes the shortest. If I try to do that later, anything to do with numbers, if I do it later, then it just takes 2 hours longer than it would have, or 20 minutes with a fresh mind. I quickly get that out of the way, and you're
getting that frog eaten early in the day.
Exactly, because it is a frog. And then I get moving, so I do jog. Not too much, like a 2.5k or 3k. Get my body moving. And if I'm not moving because the weather's, we're in the tropics.
Just for the record, we were supposed to record this in a different forest this morning in the middle of a walk, but it's raining. It's equatorial winter. So yes.
So we're freezing at 15 degrees Celsius. So getting out as well. And if I'm not out, I do a treadmill. I walk, and I found this fantastic that I work while I'm on the treadmill, actually. pull out my phone.
Okay.
And it's very interesting because you don't get distracted. It's very different when you're sitting at a table and you look at something and there's something about, because your emotions are found. There's some serious productivity when you're moving on a treadmill. And
Interesting. I usually associate that movement, especially the repetitive movement of treadmill or swimming laps, which we both enjoy too. I usually associate that more with space and creativity. But I guess the same thing. Your mind is free, so you can apply it to whatever you want.
Exactly. It's very interesting. I tried it once. It was an accident. I'm going to read it up and see. There must be some body of work around why I feel very productive while doing repetitive work, like stuff that I need to just everyone reply to emails and everything. I can do that on a treadmill.
So what a shining example you are of so many virtues. But I want to know what your guilty pleasure is too.
Wow. I'm a foodie, so I do love my chocolate and my ice cream sandwiches I recently discovered courtesy of my children, the biscuits and
yes.
I am a foodie and I love my food, so perhaps that's my guilty pleasure. A simple one.
Does it make you feel guilty?
Yeah. That's it.
Or is it just something
Sometimes,
that you're...
if I overdo it, but not always.
Yes.
Especially in moderation, it's okay.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Guilt
is well, of course you went to Catholic school, so it's a much overused emotion. But that sounds as though.
And I don't know whether reading books at some point it does become, when I overdo it.
I have a couple of clients who talked about feeling guilty when they're maybe sitting on the sofa at a weekend when the children are around and they're reading rather than absolutely interacting with those children all the time. But
and the phone's a guilty pleasure for everyone now. I don't know. So I'm trying to work that out, but
Does your phone sleep with you in your bedroom?
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty sure there's something in Atomic Habits about that.
I'm sure.
But okay.
But for now, we're ignoring that. We're jogging in the morning. That's it. That's what we're taking away from Atomic Habits.
So if we were to go deep down and think about the one thing that you truly wouldn't really feel comfortable talking about here, what might it be?
Oh, that's difficult. I've said everything,
You're a pretty open person.
Yes, I've tried it.
Often it's the thing that maybe you haven't quite reached yet. You can sense that there's something you should be thinking about taking action on. Maybe it's a background feeling, maybe it's on your radar, but you're not quite there yet.
Yeah, and when you say that, maybe I'm thinking of something beyond what the other things I said. But interestingly, that even as much as I spoke about my mother and relationships around that, I think in a session I've been in that was about parenting and parenting from who you are, I do realize that probably was not as emotionally connected to my mother as I'd have loved to be, or as other people are, and therefore, because that's not her style, and again, with our generation, it wasn't the style either, so it might be a lot of people, but I think for me, a little bit around that, and then therefore, that relates to how, because they say you learn from your mother emotional attachment, and your father, I don't remember what, because I stuck on this emotional attachment, and so just being, I realized being that I have to work on relationships a bit more intentionally, and nurturing them a little bit more. For my children, I think it comes a little bit easier, but even my female friendships and there is, I don't connect in the same way, and I probably can't change it right now, but I just have to have some intentionality about being open and fostering those kind of relationships, both with friendships, but also with family, and even with my mother, So it's very easy for it to be very transactional and very technical, and what have you
getting stuff done.
Getting stuff done. It might be difficult to try and change a lot of those notions and perceptions even with people receiving them, but just an awareness that I need to work a little bit more about calling people up, asking
so
how
that's
they're
your
doing.
big unfinished work. And creating that awareness is allowing you to begin to to get to it
Yeah.
and not be hiding it anymore.
Exactly. Or it being
What?
hidden on its own.
Exactly.
Get it out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that sounds as though that's going to be part of the big focus for
Yes.
the coming years.
Yes. I know it will be, and it probably never be finished. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
Emma, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've come to a beautiful ending for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
It's
you.
been a great pleasure in this setting.
Indeed, aren't we
Yeah.
lucky? Even if it is, well, that was
Oh.
obviously a signal that it's the end.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire.